Yeah, thanks for having me here, and thanks for the ground and everything. And well, this is one of the few papers not about privacy, I think, in the conference. So hopefully that's your new perspective on digitization. And so this is a joint work with Coleman, who's here as well. So usually I'll say all the errors are him, but he's here, so it's all mine. So this is a paper, a project on headline changes, and what's the impact of that, and all that stuff. So let me start with an anecdote. So that's about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, that was the beginning of the pandemic, and then President Donald Trump was trying to push through the coronavirus relief package, and then the Democratic Party were opposed to that. And New York Times ran a story at that time. The first headline was Democrats block action on a $1.8 trillion stimulus. Right? And not long after that, they changed the headline without changing the content at all. They changed the headline to Democrats block action on stimulus plans seeking worker protections. Right? So kind of changed the narrative a little bit. And then after that, there's a third headline. Right? Partisan divide threatens deal on rescue bill. Right? So as you can see that the narrative has changed pretty dramatically. But the content of the article didn't really change, right? But as you can tell, as you would expect, President Trump at that time was not very happy about that. Well, that's only one of the tweets that he tweeted out at that time, saying that, well, New York Times changed headline 3 times to satisfy the radical left, and then a good story got worse and worse, and then very unfair, and things like that, right? And I think he tweeted out something else, which I don't have the space to incorporate here. But this is an interesting anecdote in the sense that in several ways. One is that headline is very important because it catches a lot of attention. President Trump was one of them. And also that headline change was not really feasible or was almost impossible before digitization, right? Before we have the hard paper that you can't really change the headline in the middle of running a story, but now you can change it almost like every other minute or so if you want to do that. Yes. Okay. So this is something that we want to look at, and it turns out that it's a very common practice in the industry that Chartbeat, which is one of the leading analytic firms doing the headline change or other digitization related strategy for the media industry, says that it's very common, and they have a lot of clients, and 80% of the top US publications are doing something like this, right? Using some related technology to do headline changes or headline tests. Not only United States, but it covers 68 countries as well, right? That's the client base. I know one pretty good English newspaper in Hong Kong, which is where I'm from, also use the service as well. So, and New York Times is pretty open about that, right? So if you just Google online New York Times A/B test or headline test, you'll find an article in which they are pretty open, just write a whole article explaining what they do, and well, yeah, they explain what A/B test is, which I assume all of us here know what's that about. And not only do they do A/B tests on headlines, they also change headline without doing the test. Right? Sometimes they just want to change the narratives of the stories without running a test, right? And we also look at that as well. So as a big picture question, we know that New York Times has been profiting a lot in the digital era. The number of subscribers has grown a lot, and I think last time I saw they have more than 10 million subscribers already, and the annual profit, as last time I checked, was close to $70 million, and a lot of that was thanks to digitization or how they use the technology. But at the same time, a lot of people complain or think that digitization also may lead to polarization. And this is something that we want to try to see if that's the case or not, right? So this is a very early stage of the paper. So if you have any questions, comments, yeah, feel free to raise. Yes, Giovanni.
Besides the A/B test and just changing the headlines, what is used as method to change the headlines? There are other tests used besides the A/B test.
You mean in terms of headlines or?
Yeah, in terms of headlines.
That's the one that we are aware of. So sometimes they don't do the A/B test; they just change the headline.
Yeah. Besides these two.
Besides these two, I'm not aware of any other. Yeah. Well, Coleman may know. Yeah.
Variations like multi-arm-banded, but these are all variations.
Yeah. Right.
So just so that I understand the story, which is, I experiment with the choice of the headline to increase readership, and could it be that doing so causes me to pick headlines that exacerbate polarization? Is that the?
Yeah. So we want to see if, well, so there's several things that we try to do here, right? So one of the main contribution is we collect the unique data set on New York Times headline changes. The current data that, the current results that I'm going to present here is based on the data from 4 or 5 months last year. But we have been collecting data since then, so we have, up until this day, right now, the computer at Coleman's office is still running, collecting data. So in the next version, we will try to have more data to work on. And well, unfortunately, we cannot get access to the New York Times actual viewership data, right? They're not going to let us get access to that, not for the lack of trying, but instead we go to Twitter using the Twitter API to download all the tweets that share the article's URL as a proxy of the viewership of the articles, of each articles in our data. And one good thing about the Twitter data is that there's a lot of things that we can do with the Twitter data. We can do sentiment analysis. We can do some machine learning to try to measure or estimate the political slang of the tweets themselves to try to get a sense of what the readers are commenting on. So that's what we do. I'll talk a bit more about that later on. And there's several results that are worth highlighting here. The
top button should be
the bottom. Oh yeah, there you go. Okay. So there's several results that's worth highlighting. One is that we documented a proportion of articles that has headline changes. So 20% in total, right? I don't know what's your prior, whether it's high or low, but 20% of articles, at least in our data so far, has ever had a headline change. Either they go through A/B test or they just do an immediate change, right? So among the 20%, 2/3 has just have an immediate change without going through an A/B test. And then 1/3 of the 20%, which is 6% in total, has done an A/B test, right? So that's what we found in the data so far. Yes?
Quick clarifying question, the A/B test, you can infer based on that 30-minute mark?
So I'll explain how we define A/B test in a second, in maybe 2 slides after that. So we try to see what causes the headline changes. right? There are several things that's correlated with the headline changes, but one thing that we found interesting that worth highlighting in the presentation here is the social media pressure. So, I'll give an anecdote when I get to that, but in essence is that the New York Times do pay attention to what's going on in the social media, in particular Twitter world, and to see what's the responses, comments of the articles on the articles, and they may respond to that, or they may succumb to the pressure, right, using President Trump's words. And the last thing that we did was to try to see what are the impacts of headline change. What happened after they do the headline change? Do they increase views? Yes, we found that. Do they increase polarized response? We found some evidence of that. And does it attract more polarized readers? So far, we haven't found evidence of that. Yes?
Just to clarify the more views, is this substitution between different New York Times articles, or is there an extensive margin that you get new, eyeballs overall? Because, I can imagine people that are going to read the newspaper for 20 minutes a day, and they're going to choose which articles they read based on the headlines. Mm-hmm. So are you basically cannibalizing the other articles, or how much is this new traffic?
That's a good question. We haven't really investigated the cannibalization or substitution amount between articles. We haven't really explicitly looked at that, so we're so far, it will be more clear when we get to the specification, whether we have addressed that or not. Yeah. Yes?
I could be more patient, but I'm curious. So will you also look at whether more polarizing headlines create more views?
Yes, so that's the next step that we want to do. So we haven't really done the textual analysis on the headlines themselves. So what we have done is we have done textual analysis on the tweets themselves, right? What they tweet about. So that's what the impacts part is about. But that's the next part that we want to do. Yeah, definitely.
And
yes.
do you know when the New York Times is doing these experiments, is their focus on just increasing the readership for that article, or are they trying to learn something about how to write headlines?
Well, my impression is that they want to increase the views or performance, using the words, the performance of the article. So here, well, I didn't quote that here, but in the same article that I got a quote from, I think they say something similar to that the reason why they want to do that is to increase the performance of the article. And in one of the correspondence with one of the editors at New York Times is that one of the reasons why they want to do an A/B test on a particular article is that they may have thought that article might have underperformed compared to what they would expect. So performance, in my understanding, is in terms of views, would be one of the main objectives in doing all these things. Right. Good. So, let's see. Right. So let me talk a bit about the data. So a major part of the data is the scraping the New York Times headlines. Right. So this is just a screenshot of the computer in Coleman's office, and so it runs every 5 minutes for the data that we are presenting today. But for the extra part, for the data that we are continually scraping right now, it runs every minute. Right? So it runs every 5 minutes. What it does is to get the headlines and some other information from the New York Times API, like the section, the tone, and all the other articles related information. And also, we use randomly generated user agent and never send copy headers just to avoid being identified so that we don't get the same headlines even if when they're doing headline change or A/B testing, right? So this is just to avoid, just to make sure we can detect A/B tests. So we have a kind of a panel of observations of the same articles, and so how we define A/B test. So yeah, right. And I, okay. Sorry. So going back to your question, so how we define A/B test? So if we observe an article that has only changed the headline once within the hour, then it's just an immediate headline change. If we observe it's just like going back and forth. So if we observe more than one headline changes within an hour, then we define it to be A/B test, right? So we can change the. I think I did change it to 3 here. The results pretty much the same, I would say. So that's how we define A/B test at the moment, right?
Sorry, but
yes.
if it is only 2, it means that they stay on the second, right? 1, 2.
Yeah. So it means
They never go back to
you start
the
from A and then B and then going back to A.
Is that counted as?
It's counted as A/B test.
Yeah, but is that how many switches that?
1 and 2, right?
Okay.
Right, from A to B and then B to A. Right,
Perfect,
right.
thank you.
But that's got to be under inclusive. Because there's the we
There's
test
a
start with
formula
B.
in the paper that it'll get better, our scrape frequency gets better.
Right. So now it's every 5 minutes, so we get like 12 observation per hour, right? In the next batch of data, we have 60 observations per
Each
hour.
5-minute time that you go in and treat it a different user? Because my understanding, they randomize across user, right? So even if I go in, I'm always going to see the same title, right? Whatever I was randomizing.
That's where we did the cookie and the user
Yeah.
agent. That's at least according to the CS literature we saw, that's how they.
Yeah, every time we scrape, New York Times homepage would identify us as a different user with different, sometimes we may be a Mac, sometimes we may be a PC or something like that. Yeah, with different browser and yeah, all the different kind of identifiers. Right? So we do observe headline changes. So at least it seems to be working. Let's see. Okay. So just some summary. Yes.
I have a clarifying question. So this is slightly technical, which I don't understand, but when you deploy the scraper and you randomly generate the user agent, do you have to specify a location of where the user is accessing the web page from?
No, right?
No. Okay.
Yeah, and it makes, like, you'd probably think, and this, I think, gets back to Habib's question, that they would maybe use IP addresses for this,
Right.
but that wouldn't be a good group. Like, it wouldn't make, to the extent that to some level, like, everybody coming from Penn will have a comparable IP address.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're using, that's not a good unit to base these different groups on. So at least according to what we know of the CS literature, they don't use IP addresses to do this.
I see.
But, you know, that's.
Right. So maybe then institutionally, like, would you have any idea about whether, like, because different headlines with different sort of slants might be beneficial or might target different people with different tastes across different parts of the country? I was just wondering how they run their A/B tests and how their system would utilize the information that you're sending as a random user agent. Like, if I have a less Trumpy headline, maybe it's someone coming from Philadelphia. If I have a more Trumpy headline, it might be someone who's like to us, I don't know, south of Philadelphia or something. But yeah, just
All I can say is to our limited understanding, that that's not what they're doing.
Okay.
You know, it's just literally based on, like, you can see this far, like, this is the computer running. Literally, it's just like user agents, and it's just, we take a random,
got it.
pretty Chinese browsers. all sorts of crazy.
Can you repeat that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Oh, just the randomization, as we understand it, is based not on location, but on the kind of browser you tell the New York Times you're using, which we're spoofing what it is.
Thank you so much.
Yes, me also ask, oh no, sorry, Pinar.
Additional clarification questions, but so wouldn't you deploy all these titles all at the same time if you're doing an A/B test, just or multi-bandit? What's the change story for change, or what's the implication? You're assuming, I guess, you have one, and then eventually you're changing to something else. But if I'm doing a test, I should be deploying things at the same time.
Yeah. So it should be at the same time.
Or
So
the
the
change that they've already learned and concluded that one is better, and now everybody's converging to a single title, or is it?
Well, eventually they will converge to, well, as far as we can tell, after a while, maybe within an hour, so we don't know the exact time of the A/B test, obviously, but after a while, the headline would converge to one.
If I deploy things together, wouldn't that be an immediate headline change?
Say that again?
If I'm deploying a single test, have multiple tests all at the same time, which you can detect with different users.
So you mean within a very short period of time? Because if the test runs for like 20, 30 minutes, right? So within that 20.
How that?
Sorry?
How would you know that?
Well, we are picking it up every 5 minutes. So every 5 minutes there's a random user agent that goes to the New York Times website, right?
Yeah, they've said they do. So we have to kind of rely on them.
Yeah.
Being honest.
Yeah.
But you should be able to infer that from the stabilizing of the headline changes. Because you could infer the length of the test from the data, right?
Yeah, again, like coming back to your earlier question, because our scraping is so infrequent at this point, well, hopefully when we get down to the minute data, that is going to do a better job of figuring this out. Because when I talk to CS people, they can't believe these tests last this long. It should be like 5, given the user base of the New York Times.
Are you only running one? Are you running these things in parallel?
No, that was my question.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's like one instance.
Yeah, because if you run them in parallel, you could see how many headlines are being shown simultaneously, right? So
Right, that would be a good way to try it. I mean, the only concern would be we would get banned. I mean, in fairness, I mean, there's one computer who really whacked. They must think somebody in Winston-Salem really loves the New York Times.
Also, just to understand the environment, but when the New York Times is talking about this, you said in a very open way, when they refer to A/B testing, they also mean the fact that this changes over time, or do they do it simultaneously when they do it? Do you know that or not?
What do you exactly mean over time?
Over time, you change it after 5 minutes, and then you see, and you change it again, and then you see which is what you're capturing here.
Right.
Or do they give
Or
two alternatives simultaneously randomized to happen?
Yeah, so my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that within a period of time, 5, 10, 20 minutes, they would do that simultaneously, showing the headlines to different people at the same time, and then after that period, they would decide which one is the winner, and then they would pick the winner. That's my understanding. And yeah, our hope is that our scraper within that period would be able to pick up the different headlines.
And you don't know whether sometimes headline is changing just because the content is changing, you're updating, I don't know. 7 people died, and no, actually it wasn't 7, it was 5, and then you change the headline because of the factual content of the news.
Right, so that probably will be picked up
understanding
as
is
the
that
immediate headline change.
You should be able
I
to
would
detect
think.
that there are multiple
Yeah.
titles.
So, and that may explain why there's more immediate headline change rather than. Yeah.
Thanks.
Definitely. Give that a shot.
All right, so just some of the statistics. As I said, so far we found in the data, 20% of the articles that has some headline changes, one type of headline change in throughout the run or until they're taken down from the New York Times homepage. And then among the 20%, 2/3 of them has just had an immediate change. Right, 6%, 1/3 of the 20% had an A/B test, right? The way we define it, And we do find that, well, the first column is some of the statistics of those articles with the A/B test. They are more popular, and they stay on the homepage longer. And if you look at the sentiment of the headline, they are slightly more negative, and also it's more news are more likely to have headline change rather than soft article like feature articles, right? So so that's the kind of some of the statistics here.
Another clarification, but how do you deal with it? This is assuming the text hasn't changed at all. Is that right?
Right.
Then how do you deal with developing stories?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we haven't.
Are you ignoring them then in this case? Or?
At the moment, yes. At the moment, yes. I think, right?
I'm not even sure we scrape the developing stores, or they get different URLs for the different components.
As far as I can tell, for say election story, they use the same URL, right? But obviously the headline changed because some new news emerged, and so they will have to update the headlines. So that would probably be captured in the immediate headline change, right? But that's a good point. Yeah. So, like I said, we don't have access to New York Times viewership data, so we use Twitter as a proxy of that. So, yeah, we use the Twitter API, and yeah, a lot of Americans use Twitter to consume news. So, which is not perfect, but it's a good source. And there are altogether almost 13,000 articles in our data so far. So in the 4.5 months data, so that 13,000 articles. And for that 13,000 articles, we try to scrape all the tweets that share the URL of those 13,000 articles. We get more than 7 million tweets in total, including retweets. And then it's coming from 1.7 million unique distinct users. So, we did some textual analysis to get the sentiment scores of the tweets, and then we also construct the political slant measure of the tweet, which I'll talk about in a second, and. So there's a lot of things in the Twitter that we can try to we can exploit. One of the things is for among those 1.7 million distinct users, we can look at each one of them, the profile, and then try to see what's the news diet. Right? So that's a website, Blind Spotter. If you Google Blind Spotter, you'll find that. And what it does is that for each, so you can type in the Twitter ID or the Twitter username on that website, and then it would show these things will pop up, right? So what it pops up here is the news diet of that Twitter account. Right? So on the left here is Aaron Burnett. Is that how you pronounce her name? Aaron Burnett, a CNN anchor, and according to her, Blind Spotter, her Twitter account, it's 88% left. So 88% of its news that she shares on her Twitter are left-leaning. And you can also see the top 3 news sources that she shares most often. Right? On the other hand, on the right side, there's Tucker Carlson, a Fox News channel anchor, and as you can imagine, his news style is more right-leaning, right? So we contact the Blind Spotter people and then get the news diet for each of the 1.7 million users. So that's part of the data. And then we try to use a machine learning method to get a sense of the political slant of the tweets, right? So the idea comes from Boxer and Conway. Let's do a work in progress, I think. So the idea is we go to ProPublica, an investigative journalism website that, well, one of the things that they have is that they keep account of the Twitter accounts of many politicians in the Congress and in the Senate, and among those people who has ever run the recent Congress and Senate as well. So we get that, it's more than 2,000 accounts, and for each one of them, we try to look at the tweet history. I think technically it's not all the tweets, it's the past 2,000 tweets or something like that, which is more than enough for us. And then, so we look at the tweets, clean the tweets using standard ways, and then a minority of them are independent, so we drop them. So we only keep the Democrats and Republicans, and then we use a machine learning method to try to predict, judging from the tweet, what type of tweet is Republican, what type of tweet is Democrat, right? So we have a model, we have a model that can predict the tweet, whether it's pro-Republican or pro-Democrat. So we use that to apply to the NYT, to the New York Times tweets, to the 7 million tweets in our data to see whether they are pro-Democrat or pro-Republican. So at the end of the day, it just comes down to a probability. For each tweet, there's a probability, say 0.5 or 0.9. If it's 0.9, then it's 90% chance that it's coming from Democrat. Or if it's 0.1, then it's 10%. Right? So simple as that. Now, so this also very simple some statistics here that those that has ever done A/B test or just a simple headline change, they're usually more popular in terms of the tweet count, especially the one that has done A/B test. And they're usually more negative. The tweets are more negative, and the Twitter account usually have similar news diet using the blind spotter measures. And also the political slang do not vary much across the articles type. So most of them, I think, yes, around, let me see, where is that? Oh, here. I have to do the math, but it's around 60%, right? 60% Democrat, I think. So it's slightly left-leaning, the tweets themselves, which I don't know what's your prior, but that's within my prior, I would say. Now, one thing that we've done, how much time do I have?
You have until 4.
Okay, so I have enough time. So one thing that we try to do is to try to understand what caused headline change. So one thing that we found was social media pressure. So what do I mean by that? Let me give you an anecdote here. So another Trump story, sorry for that. So 3 years ago, there was a mass shooting happening in El Paso. And a few days after that, President Trump gave an address which condemned the racism and all that thing, right? New York Times, again, ran a story on that. The first headline that they used was Trump urges unity versus racism, which, to be fair, it's a fair reflection of what the speech about. But a lot of Democrats and also other people, influencers, we're not happy about that. Right? AOC said white supremacy is aided by cowardice of mainstream institutions. Nate Silver, the 538 guy, also said it's not the headline that he would use if he runs the same story, things like that. So it's not only them too, but a lot of other people have complained on Twitter as well. Not long after that, New York Times changed the headlines, changed the article's headline to assailing hate but not guns. Now, this time is Donald Trump's not happy. So he used his Twitter account, which was still active at that time, to complain that New York Times surrendered to pressure, right? And then, it's not the end of the story. New York Times, again, not long after that, changed the headline to Trump condemns white supremacy but stops short of major gun control, right? So, New York Times, not long after that, issued or posed a statement, but it's from one of the editors, I forgot which was that, but saying that it's actually the editors themselves, when they first saw the headline, the first one, they thought it's not right, so they correct it internally, right? But in the same statement, they also stated that they acknowledged that they are aware of the Twitter story going on the internet, and so they are aware of these complaints from both sides. Right? So we try to look at that to see if anything like that is more general or just specific to this story. So one thing we try to do was to try to construct a social media pressure controls. Right? The way we do that is we look at two groups of people. One is the reporter of the article, the byline. The other one is the official New York Times account. It's not just NY Times, right? It's also NY Times Business, and they have like 40-some official accounts, I think. So we look at all of them, and then we try to, from the 7 million tweets that we have in our data, we try to look at those tweets that are tweeted out by the accounts that either the reporter or the New York Times official accounts follow, right? Those are the ones that they pay attention to, presumably. And also, we also look at the tweets that mention these accounts, right? So potentially mentioning them would catch the attention as well, right? So we try to single out from this 7 million tweets, we single out those tweets that either from accounts that these guys follow or just mentioning them. And then for each type of tweets, we try to construct the number of tweets that are positive, number of tweets that are negative in terms of the sentiment, and number of tweets that are pro-Democrat. Right? Now, just a very simple OLS. Right? Here, the dependent variable is just headline change, either the immediate headline change or A/B test. And then there's a social pressure controls that I just explained, and then some other article level controls. And then we also have article fixed effects as well. And just to mention, the social pressure is from the hour before they do a headline change, right? Now, one thing that we found is that mentioning them, if you just a random person, nobody like me, Tommy Leung, posting something, complaining, New York Times, this article with the URL, complaining the headline is bad, no effect, right? If you either mention the reporter or the New York Times official account, there's no effect there, no correlation, I should say. But if you're one of the accounts that either the reporter follows or the New York Times official accounts follow, like, I don't know, Joe Biden, for example, right? And if Joe Biden says something, or if Donald Trump says something negative about the article, second row here, the more negative tweets coming out from these people that either the reporter or New York Times follow about the article, the next hour, there's higher chance of headline change. Right? So this is the immediate change. Right? The dependent variable here is the immediate headline change. Interestingly, the political slant here doesn't really have much correlation with the immediate headline change. And if we look at the A/B test, so the dependent variable now is whether the article has done an A/B test in this hour, right? again, mentioning them doesn't really seem to have much impact or correlation. And then negative tweets from the accounts that they follow seems to be positively correlated. And then interestingly, the political slant seems to be correlated with the A/B test in the next hour. Right? So we don't have an explanation for that at the moment, but that's what we found so far. So that's one thing that we found interesting that, yeah, kind of corroborates with these stories here. Okay, so impact of headline change. So again, it's a very simple regression. So here it's the outcome variable of interest. So it's either the tweet count or positive tweets, negative tweets, or pro-Democrat tweets, etc., etc. And then we have some article level controls. Also, we also control for the outcome variable, the lag variable. And then we look at whether there's headline change in the previous hours or not. So that's potentially some endogeneity problem here in the sense that, well, there's headline change because the article is either underperforming or it's actually very popular, so they want to do something to either further boost the views or something like that. So there's some potential endogeneity here. So in order to try to address that, we use an IV that is the number of other headline changes at the same time. Right? So, so other articles, you would say that they should be irrelevant to this article's performance and things like that. And in one of our correspondence with the editor, you cannot cite him, I think, that he explicitly said that we do these headline changes in lumps. So my guess is that some economy of scales in meeting time or something like that. So we use that as our IV. So this is kind of the first stage results. The headline change is positively correlated with the number of headline changes of other articles. Right? So when there are more articles, more other articles that are doing headline change in this hour, it's more likely this article have a headline change as well. If we restrict it to the other articles in the same section, the correlation is stronger. So we use that as our preferred IV. But even if you use the all other articles, regardless of the section, the results are similar, I would say. Now, the impact of the headline change. So this is for immediate headline change. If you do an immediate headline change in this hour, what happened next hour in terms of the article's performance? There's more tweets, the number of views increase, or the number of tweets shared, I should say. And both negative and positive tweets go up, but going up by the similar proportion as they would have before the headline change. And
here the assumption is that the text of the article doesn't change.
Right. So at the moment we are not controlling that, right? Yes. So ideally we want to distinguish if possible, we want to distinguish the articles that have changed or updated stories like election, right, from those that just changed the headlines, right? So there may be some way of distinguishing them, but that's probably for the next stage. Yes, but that's a good one. Yeah. So at the moment it's like a mix of the two. And the pro-Democrat slant increase as well, and increase as a proportion larger than before. So proportionally, after the immediate headline change, there's more pro-Democrat slant in the tweets about sharing the article. So that's one thing that we found interesting. In terms of the readership, if you look at the news diet of the Twitter account, not much change before and after the headline change. If you look at A/B test, it's more dramatic. I'm sorry. But the direction of the results are similar. So there are more views, more positive and negative tweets, but in terms of proportion, it's similar before and after the A/B test, and then also more pro-Democrat slants in the tweets after the A/B test. So in terms of qualitatively, it's similar, but the magnitude is larger for A/B tests.
Did you say that your measure of readership doesn't change with this? Is that what you said?
Right, as far as what we can tell. Yeah.
But isn't that surprising? I thought that was the intention of changing that.
Yeah, so we found it surprising too. I mean, putting them together seems like it's well, they may not be exactly the same reader, but it's just in terms of the news diet is similar, but the content that they tweet before and after the headline change are different. So, which in terms of the slang, political slang, yeah, not in terms of the sentiment. Right. Yeah. Yes.
So sorry, if you refer to readership, you mean readership of the specific article, right?
Yes. Right. Yes. These are all article level regression. Yes.
So this slant is more towards the left, more
More
towards
toward the left. Yes. More toward the left after the headline change. Which I don't know whether it's surprising or not. Yeah.
Can you go through the logic of the instrument once again?
The instrument is the number of headline changes for other articles, not this article, at the same hour.
And what's the mechanism that, why should they be correlated?
Well, so the idea is they do it in lumps. So I don't know whether they save the meeting time or something like that. So they tend to do a bunch of headline changes at the same time.
Right, like the engineering team is. Okay.
Yes, it's both the engineer and also the editor.
The
They have to agree on a time to do it, right? So my guess, that's my pure guess. But yeah, at least that's what we found here. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, pretty good on time, I think. So that's pretty much what we have found so far. And going forward, we want to analyze more data. Like I said, there's more data from July last year to right now. It's still collecting. And also another source of data is CrowdTangle, Facebook. So in addition to Twitter, we can potentially get some data from Facebook. And we also want to look at bots, right? Whether the headline changes, well, it increased number of tweets, but are they coming from bots or not, right? So so that would be something interesting to look at, and also we are working on collecting data from another newspaper. So just to have a comparison, not just New York Times. So we're trying to work on something on that, and so another thing that we want to look at is the headline change themselves, whether it's going to be more positive, negative, or more pro-Democrat or not, right? So these are the things that we also want to look at, and if we can distinguish, if it goes more negative, how does it affect the views or the tweet shares and things like that. So there's a lot to investigate that, and also there's some, we also want to look at the results by section to see whether it's hot news that has the most impact, feature news that has the least impact, or something like that. So that's something that we should look at as well. So we plan to look at as well. So that's, yes, I mean.
What's happening over time? Do you see more or less headline changes?
Well, you mean, right now we only have 4 months of data. So you mean within?
So maybe with the new data, it'd be interesting. This goes back, I think, to something that Ricky said earlier, is that you can imagine over time they actually learn, right? You're not going to see changes, but that's because they learn
Right.
This is the headline that's gonna get more readers.
Yeah, but I mean, my prior is that we wouldn't see a lot of changes over time because I mean, New York Times has been doing that for years now, I assume. So they've learned a lot
Yeah, but
already.
they might not have cared about it.
Maybe
Now they have
so.
the metric, right? Because before, you'd put it in print,
Mhm.
and you couldn't really measure individually, and this is a relatively new thing that they now start measuring.
I think they have been, even for the digital headline changes, they've been doing it for 5-6 years already. So my guess, I may be wrong on that, but my guess is that they've learned a lot already. But yeah, that's something that we can definitely see over time, especially with the addition of the new data. Yeah. Yes.
What's the definition of the headline? Is it just the first story that is in the homepage? Is it all the stories in the homepage? So, because if it is more than just the first one, how do you account if they move things like up or down or?
Let me see if I get your question. So in the scraper we look at the homepage. Mm-hmm. We go to nytimes.com and then look at all the articles on the homepage. I think it's 30, 40 articles. 70. Okay, 70 articles. At the same time, we look at all of them and then just grab the headlines of each of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then if they change the headline, but they also demote it from the first position to...
Right, we don't have that.
Yeah,
we don't have that. Yeah, I don't know if that's possible to get that, but...
You should look at the API.
Yeah. I don't know whether that's feasible or not, but that's a good point here too. To be fair, we know how long they've been on the homepage, so presumably, well, when time passes, they would go down the ladder. But yeah, it's not a perfect control, but yeah, we do control for that. Yes?
I think it would be interesting, I don't know if it's possible to do it, but to see how this impacts the composition of the readership of the New York Times over time as they run these tests. So, that's just an idea of, I think, what you could do in principle to, if you have enough data that cover a long enough time span, you could, in principle, now ask yourself, okay, so does the readership of the New York Times become more pro-Democrat, more polarized? Because right now you're measuring everything basically through the Twitter proxy.
Yes,
right? You have nothing that actually tells you how this actually impacts, the real, let's say, click-through data on the New York Times webpage. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, like I said, we don't have access to...
No, yeah, clearly.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting to maybe see how it feeds back into the what happens at the level of the New York Times, subscriptions. Maybe there is some data set that tells you about the number of subscribers that are pro-Democrat on the New York Times and that, change how this changed over time.
Okay, yeah, sure, we can definitely try to look at that, yeah.
Causality will be a tough call here, but...
Yeah, obviously, but that's still interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting paper. The story of like A/B testing being a way to increase polarization and move the news writing to kind of put the audience in charge of that. I think it's an interesting story. Because of that, I'm actually really most excited about what you said in the last slide about like rolling this out across multiple newspapers. I think that's going to be the most compelling thing to kind of bring this from just a story about the New York Times to kind of a robust examination across news sources and their audiences, if this is kind of a consistent pattern that you see.
Right. Yeah, that's why we try to look at Wall Street Journal now. Yeah.
Be good to look across like 100 different newspapers or 20.
Right.
I know it's, this is an unfair comment as someone who doesn't have to pay for the, just go to Wharton, or sorry, go to Penn and say, I need more grants.
We couldn't do it. We know the company that does it, and they want a result. Like, they want it to show something, so that is not a good partnership for us.
Funny. When you said that, I would look at the Journal. Its revenue model is completely different. I look at the Post. Just this New York paper, conservative slant. But the two big comments, one is, your data is February 2021 to June 2021. That's the opening 4 months of the Biden administration. And I always wonder, have you put any thoughts as to what that might do to it? But the thing that really is, that I keep thinking, A/B test to me, if it's just on popularity, is a revenue model to me, is what it feels like. And that the immediate changes in response to Twitter and all is bias, sort of. And it'd be interesting to tease out, I was surprised by the proportion that it's more immediate than A/B. I would have thought it the other way around if it's a ruthless, money-making endeavor. You can actually test the proposition of whether this is being motivated by profit or motivated by having a particular editorial voice by looking at that. I'd be interested to see you got the data here, especially if you can tie it to something about revenue or profitability or something. It'd be really interesting to see if you can disambiguate which.
But there are no actual observations from Times. This is all just how much there's buzz about it.
But even within the Times, there's got to be dual motivations, right? And so the question is, can you make any claims about what you think the real motivation is to test it?
It sort of goes back to Yusuf's earlier question about the cannibalization. Maybe the effect is they've simply shifted readers from the sports section to the...
Yeah, so that's something that we can potentially look at.
Because I think he kind of nailed it, that the headline is one thing, but especially like on the app there's less parameters that you can change because everything is sort of just in a list. But we know from other contexts that the order in which information is presented is hugely important. This came up in the first talk too. And you sort of just wonder whether these headline changes are correlated with how large the font is, where it's placed on the page and all of that. And I understand that it's harder to scrape. I mean, in principle, you'd have the entire HTML source code, but you'd have to be quite clever to think about how to modify that. But
that's a good point. Yes.
Sorry, one. Regarding other newspapers, I will look on the right to have left leaning, right leaning. And regarding the mechanism, one thing that struck me is you said the slant tends to go more towards left.
Left, yes.
And Democrats tends to tweet more. And there is potentially the New York Times trying to learn whether they are targeting the prior that the readers would like to see confirmed by what they read. And if Democratic leaning readers complain about the article, they adjust it towards the left because they want to target the left. And this would be consistent with higher tweets after the changes.
Right.
And
so,
this is interesting because there is a literature on polarization and news provision, and there is a question of is demand-driven or supply-driven.
Right.
And there is a paper by Schleifer and Mulaneytan in the AR a few years ago where the story is that people at different priors and different news sources just try to target those priors, and this would be evidence of exactly that mechanism at play.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean that's for sure. In the paper we cite a bunch of.
That's why I would go right to see if the same mechanism works, but just in the opposite direction.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good point. So to be honest, I'm not American, so I'm not very good at judging the right and left in the political spectrum here. Comment coverage, better sense on that. I don't know. Wall Street Journal is not right enough.
I think it's like some articles of the Pew Research Center place it as centered.
Okay.
There is one 2016, I don't know. I can tell you later if you want.
Have you thought of just presenting or discussing your results with the New York Times? What would they say? Do you have any channel just to discuss with them, since they've been doing this? Maybe they don't share data with you, I understand, but at least engage with them. I mean, usually that's...
I talk to reporters sometimes and editors, and it's some combination of, we're not interested in your opinion because we already know. Tell us more about what you found, but it has to go through a back channel. I'm trying to think of anything else. We haven't gotten tons of, we've gotten some institutional knowledge, but that's about it. And we're 100% apparently the engineers are top secret folks that you're not allowed to talk to. So whatever specifics they're doing.
I think it's about choosing the right headline for the paper, Coleman. So why don't we end here? Let me announce the second word for this talk. Center. Thank you very much.
Left, center.
Reconvene at 4:15.